Hey, welcome to another Le Mans Ultimate Lap guide. This time we're doing GT3 at Algarve. This time I'm driving the Corvette GT3. It's not too bad around here. It is a very loose car to drive though. All my traction control, ABS and brake bias settings are on screen if you're interested. For the first braking point, there's this white line on the outside of the track there. We're braking about a car length before that, all the way on the outside curb to open up our entry line as much as we can. Trailing the brakes as we enter the turn here, not holding the brakes for too long because it'll understeer us through here. Apexing on the curb but not touching the sausage curb because that'll bounce us out wide. And then being patient, after the apex we can get back on throttle. On exit, it's very easy to invalidate your lap here. Keep your right side wheels within the white line. And then we're looking for our next braking point, which is another white line on the outside of the track right there. And as we get to the outside curb, that's when we're going to start braking very hard. A few car lengths before that white line, depends on how much speed you've carried to this point. And then turning in very tight here, very slow, and aiming to apex on the curb. If you go over the sausage curb, it's not going to ruin your lap. You can afford to do that, but it might kind of cost you a little bit of time on exit, so try to avoid the sausage curb if possible. At this point, we're coming right back to the right side of the track there where the green arrow is to open up our entry line for this turn. I could have been slightly more to the right here, and be aware the more angled you are to the right here, the harder it's going to be for you to take this turn. If you get the turning point right, you should be able to take this turn flat out. As you go over this crest here, the car's going to get very floaty and light, very easy to oversteer, so you're going to have to really balance your throttle and steering inputs to get through that turn flat out. If you don't turn enough, you're going to just understeer straight off wide. Keep your left side wheels within the white line or you'll invalidate the lap. Some cars might take that turn a little easier than this one. I find the Corvette quite loose, so it's very easy to slide through there. Into the next hairpin, we're looking for that 100 board, braking about alongside that, very hard on the brakes all the way on the right side of the track. We really want to slow the car down here because it's very easy to go wide. Keep slowing the car down, turning quite tight. You can go onto the curb or just apex along the white line there. Just be very patient to get back on throttle, because if you get on throttle too hard too early, especially while you're turning a lot, it's very easy to just spin out as you come out of the turn. Carry your momentum to the outside here, keeping your left side wheels within the white line to make sure your lap stays valid. Then through this bend to the left, we're going to keep tight alongside the curb here. The next turn up here requires a bit of bravery. You can actually carry a lot of speed into this. Turning as we get to that white line and apexing on the inside curb there. Try not to cut the grass like I just about did here. Carrying quite a lot of speed, using the brakes just a little bit to help rotate the car into this turn, and then carrying your momentum all the way to the outside curb. You can actually get your left side wheels on the red part of the track, just on the left of the curb there, but not going too far out because you'll invalidate the lap. But using all the track width there, and I turned in just a little bit early here actually. You can turn a little bit later and have a mid-apex through here, carrying some speed. On exit, you have to be very careful. The car's going to get very floaty, so you have to be very gentle with your throttle inputs and balance your steering inputs with that. If you're too aggressive with your steering and throttle inputs, you're going to oversteer, and if you're too cautious, you'll understeer wide past that white line, probably invalidating your lap. Just keep your right side wheels within the white line on exit there and you should be okay. Back to the right side of the track, but not too far right, because if you go too much over this curb on the right there, it's very easy to invalidate your lap. There's not much tolerance there, so stay within the curb or on the curb, you should be fine. Then keeping it tight on the left here alongside this curb, and then keeping to the left to open up our entry line for this next turn. Quite a tricky blind braking zone here. We've got a Marshall stand on the left and the 50 board on the fence. We can use the braking references, and as we just go over this crest a bit right there, we can start braking. And we don't want to go too tight through here, and we don't want to go too wide too early, because those will both mess us up for this turn. At this point, you should be aiming about where the green arrow is. Going towards the left red arrow is probably going to put you out into the curb, and the right red arrow is way too tight, and you're not going to make this turn very easy for yourself. You want a mid to late apex on this turn. The straighter you can make your exit, the better and the more stable you're going to be. You can use the inside curb or narrowly avoid it, going past the white line there and just making sure your right side wheels are within the white line on exit. Then bring your car back towards the middle of the track there to open up your entry line for this left bend, which we're going to hug the white line on, even touching the curb. Then we're looking for a white line on the outside of the track. We're braking a couple car lengths before that, hard on the brakes, and we're going to start trailing off the brakes as we enter this turn down to first gear. It's a very tight turn. Mid to late apex through here, we're going to carry some momentum out using all the track width on exit. I wouldn't really suggest running over this inside curb here. It's quite bumpy and it might slow you down on exit. And it's also very easy to oversteer on the exit of this turn if you get too hard on throttle too early while turning a lot. Bringing the car back to the left here, looking out for where that red area is just beyond the grass, and that's going to be our braking reference, braking just at or just before we get to that point. In this case, I went a bit too deep, braking a bit late, which made me miss the apex slightly. At this point, you want to have about a mid-apex, and then you can start getting back on throttle, rotating yourself out of the turn. You can see me struggling a bit on traction, trying to get back online after going a bit wide there. On exit, you can drop your left side wheels just on the left of the curb. Don't go any further than that because you'll invalidate the lap. This will nicely line you up for the entry of this turn. The entry for this turn is very important. It's going to determine how much speed we carry down the start-finish straight. We're turning off the curb just before we get to the end of the curb here, and then we're apexing right there as we go over the crest. You're probably going to need to lift off throttle a bit just as we go over the crest before we get to the apex to ensure we don't understeer wide. bringing our right side wheels onto the curb or even dropping them just a little bit onto the yellow area on the inside to slightly shorten our line. Then as we get past the apex, we can get back on throttle. If you've got a really good setup, it's possible that you could take that turn flat out in some cars. On exit again, you can drop your left side wheels just a tiny bit on the left of the curb using the green area, but any wider than that, it's going to invalidate your lap, so be very careful there. And I'd probably suggest to spend a little bit more time off throttle entering that final turn during a race, because that final turn is really going to punish the tyres. The more you turn, the harder you push through there. So if you're lifting a bit earlier, you don't have to turn as hard and you might be just a little bit nicer on the tyres. I'm going to play through the whole lap again without any interruptions, and then we'll come back at the end of the lap to do a pit entry guide. So I'll see you then. For the pit entry of this track in GT3, it's actually quite simple. Just take the last turn like you normally would, but keep turning after you get to the exit, because we're looking for where that white line goes across the track. It's hard to see at this angle, but there's also this point where red and white striped paint starts, so we're going to be braking about a car length or two before we get to that point. Hard on the brakes there all the way until we're 60 at the line. And that's my guide for GT3 at Algarve. It's a bit of a roller coaster, but quite a fun track after you get used to it. I think one of the biggest points of this track is keeping at least two wheels within the white line at all times to ensure that you don't give lap invalidations. Alright, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.